The autumn rain drummed against the tall windows of Thornwick Palace as Queen Isabella sat in her private study, staring at the letter that had arrived that morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words again, each sentence more shocking than the last. The elegant handwriting belonged to her trusted friend Lady Margaret, but the contents threatened to destroy everything the royal family had worked to build. Prince Alexander, her eldest son and heir to the throne, had always been the perfect royal. Handsome, charming, and dedicated to his duties, he had married Princess Elena 5 years ago in what the entire kingdom celebrated as a fairy tale wedding. Their marriage had produced 2 beautiful children and seemed to represent everything good about the monarchy. The public adored them, and their popularity had helped restore faith in the crown after years of scandals. But now, Lady Margaret's letter revealed a truth that could shatter this perfect image. During a recent charity gala in the neighboring kingdom of Valdoria, she had witnessed something that left her deeply troubled. Prince Alexander had been seen in what appeared to be an intimate conversation with Duchess Sophia, his stepmother's younger sister. The way they looked at each other, the secret touches when they thought no one was watching, and their hurried departure to a private balcony had convinced Lady Margaret that something inappropriate was happening. Duchess Sophia had joined the royal family 3 years ago when she married the Queen's brother, Duke Richard. At 28, she was stunningly beautiful, intelligent, and had quickly become a favorite among the nobility. She had also become close to the royal family, often staying at the palace for weeks at a time. The Queen had welcomed her warmly, appreciating her grace and the happiness she brought to Richard, who had been a widower for many years. The Queen's mind raced as she considered the implications. If Lady Margaret's suspicions were correct, it would mean that Alexander was having an affair with his own step-aunt. The scandal would be enormous, potentially destroying not just Alexander's marriage but also threatening the stability of the monarchy itself. The press would have a field day, and the public's trust, so carefully rebuilt over the years, would crumble once again. As she sat in the growing darkness, Queen Isabella remembered other signs she had perhaps ignored or dismissed. The way Alexander's eyes would light up when Sophia entered a room, how he always seemed to find excuses to be wherever she was during family gatherings, the long walks they would take together in the palace gardens, claiming to discuss charity work. Even Princess Elena had mentioned once, almost jokingly, that her husband seemed to enjoy Sophia's company perhaps a bit too much. The Queen picked up her phone several times, wanting to call Alexander immediately and demand an explanation. But each time she hesitated. What if Lady Margaret was wrong? What if her observations had been misinterpreted? Accusing her son of such a betrayal without concrete proof could damage their relationship forever. Yet doing nothing while potentially allowing this situation to continue felt equally impossible. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil in her heart. Everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made for the crown, could be undone by this revelation. The monarchy had survived many scandals throughout history. But in today's world, with social media and constant scrutiny, even the hint of such impropriety could be devastating. As midnight approached, Queen Isabella made a decision. She would investigate discreetly, gathering more information before confronting anyone. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The future of the kingdom, her family's legacy, and the happiness of everyone involved depended on handling the situation with the utmost care and wisdom. Locked Lady Margaret's letter in her private safe and prepared for what she knew would be the most difficult period of her reign. Tomorrow, she would begin her careful investigation, starting with a closer observation of Alexander and Sophia's interactions. She prayed that her fears were unfounded, but deep in her heart, she sensed that her family was about to face its greatest crisis. Yet the rain continued to fall as the Queen finally retired to her chambers, knowing that sleep would not come easily. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier than it did that night, as she contemplated the shocking revelation that threatened to rock the very foundations of the royal family. The old conservatory had been abandoned for nearly a decade, its glass walls clouded with age and its interior filled with the remnants of exotic plants that had once been the pride of Queen Isabella's grandmother. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting hidden away in the forgotten corners of the vast palace grounds where few people ever ventured. As evening approached, the queen positioned herself behind the overgrown hedges that bordered the structure, her heart heavy with dread. She didn't have to wait long. Alexander arrived first, moving quickly through the shadows like a man who had made this journey before. He carried a small blanket and what appeared to be a bottle of wine, details that made the queen's stomach turn as she realized this was clearly not their first clandestine encounter. A few minutes later, Sophia appeared from the opposite direction, having obviously taken a different route to avoid being seen together. What the queen witnessed through the dusty glass broke her heart completely. This was not a casual flirtation or a moment of weakness. Alexander and Sophia embraced with the familiarity of established lovers, their passion evident even from a distance. They spoke quietly, their heads close together, sharing what seemed to be both tender words and urgent concerns. The queen watched as her son spread the blanket on the floor among the dead plants and broken pottery, creating an intimate space where they could be alone. The conversation she managed to overhear through a broken window panel revealed the true depth of their relationship. Sophia spoke about how difficult it was to pretend indifference when they were around the family, how her heart raced every time she saw him across a crowded room. Alexander confessed that he thought about her constantly, that his marriage to Elena had begun to feel like a prison, and that he had never experienced the kind of connection he felt with Sophia. Most shocking of all was their discussion of the future. They spoke about finding a way to be together permanently, about the possibility of Alexander abdicating his claim to the throne if necessary. Sophia mentioned that Richard was already planning to retire to his estate in Scotland, and suggested that perhaps a divorce could be arranged quietly. They talked about moving to a different country where they could start fresh, away from the constraints of royal life and family obligations. As the queen listened to her son planning to abandon everything he had been raised to protect and serve, she felt a mixture of rage, disappointment, and profound sadness. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. Alexander was considering walking away from his birthright, his children, his wife, and his duty to the crown for this relationship. The conversation took an even more disturbing turn when they began discussing Elena. Alexander expressed guilt about deceiving his wife, but claimed that their marriage had been arranged for political reasons and had never involved real love. Sophia agreed, saying that while Elena was lovely, she was too naive and sheltered to truly understand someone as complex as Alexander. They convinced themselves that Elena would actually be happier without a husband, who couldn't give her his whole heart. The queen watched in horror as they began to justify their betrayal of not just Elena, but the entire family. They painted themselves as star-crossed lovers trapped by circumstances beyond their control, ignoring the very real harm their actions would cause to innocent people. When they began to make physical advances toward each other, the queen turned away, unable to witness any more. As she made her way back to the palace, Queen Isabella's mind raced with the implications of what she had discovered. This wasn't a situation that would resolve itself quietly. Alexander and Sophia were planning a future together that would require destroying multiple lives and potentially bringing down the monarchy. Richard would be devastated by his wife's betrayal. Elena and the children would be heartbroken and publicly humiliated. The scandal would dominate headlines for months, if not years. Back in her private chambers, the queen began to formulate a plan. She could no longer afford to gather more information or hope that the situation would improve on its own. Immediate action was necessary to prevent a catastrophe that would affect not just her family but the entire kingdom. However, she also knew that any misstep could make the situation worse. Her first decision was to confide in someone she trusted completely. She needed an ally who could help her navigate this crisis without causing additional damage. After much consideration, she decided to reach out to Lord Chancellor William Montgomery, her longtime advisor and friend. He had helped the family through previous scandals and had both the discretion and wisdom necessary to handle such a delicate matter. The queen also realized she needed to protect Elena and the children from the immediate fallout they deserved. to know the truth, but they also deserved to hear it in a way that would minimize their pain and preserve their dignity. She began to consider how to approach Elena first. Before confronting Alexander and Sophia as she sat down to write a carefully worded message to Lord Chancellor Montgomery, asking him to meet her privately the next morning, Queen Isabella felt the weight of the crown more heavily than ever before. The decisions she made in the coming days would determine not just the fate of her family, but the future of the monarchy itself. She prayed for wisdom, strength, and the ability to protect those she loved while preserving the institutions she had sworn to serve. The old conservatory had revealed secrets that could destroy everything, but it had also shown her that action was no longer optional. The time for passive observation had ended, and the time for difficult decisions had begun. 3 days had passed since Queen Isabella received Lady Margaret's disturbing letter, and her careful observations had only deepened her concerns. During the annual Rose Garden charity luncheon, she had positioned herself strategically to watch Alexander and Sophia without appearing suspicious. What she witnessed confirmed her worst fears and added new dimensions to an already complex situation. The event had been perfectly orchestrated, as all royal functions were, with hundreds of distinguished guests mingling among the blooming roses. Princess Elena moved gracefully through the crowd, her smile radiant as she spoke with donors and charity representatives. She seemed genuinely happy, completely unaware of the undercurrent of tension that the Queen now recognized. Alexander, too, played his part flawlessly, greeting guests with his characteristic charm and warmth, but it was the subtle moments that revealed the truth. When Sophia arrived, fashionably laid in a stunning emerald dress, Alexander's entire demeanor changed. His smile became more genuine, his posture straightened, and his eyes followed her movement through the crowd. The Queen watched as he found excuses to move closer to wherever Sophia was standing, engaging in conversations with nearby guests. While stealing glances at his stepmother's sister, the most telling moment came during the charity presentation. As various speakers took the podium to discuss their causes, Alexander and Sophia found themselves standing at the back of the gathered crowd. The Queen observed from her elevated position on the terrace as they leaned closer together, supposedly to hear better over the gentle breeze. But their proximity seemed unnecessary, and when Sophia's hand briefly touched Alexander's arm while she whispered something in his ear, the intimate gesture sent a chill down the Queen's spine. Later that evening, as the family gathered for their traditional post-event dinner, the Queen noticed even more troubling signs. Duke Richard, Sophia's husband, seemed oblivious to the charged atmosphere between his wife and nephew. He spoke enthusiastically about a business trip to Australia that would keep him away for 3 weeks, mentioning how Sophia had decided to remain at the palace to help with upcoming royal engagements. The way Alexander's eyes lit up at this news did not escape his mother's attention. Princess Elena, sweet and trusting as always, even suggested that Sophia might enjoy staying in the East Wing guest suite, which was closer to the main family quarters and would make coordinating schedules easier. The irony was not lost on the Queen that her daughter-in-law was unknowingly facilitating what appeared to be an affair with her own husband as the dinner progressed. Queen Isabella found herself studying the family dynamics more carefully. She noticed how Sophia would laugh just a bit too enthusiastically at Alexander's jokes, how she would find reasons to ask his opinion on matters that really didn't require his input, and how she seemed to hang on his every word. Alexander, for his part, was clearly basking in her attention, becoming more animated and charming than the Queen had seen him in months. The most heartbreaking moment came when little Princess Charlotte, Alexander and Elena's 4-year-old daughter, climbed onto her father's lap during dessert. As the child chattered about her day at the palace school, Alexander's attention kept drifting to Sophia, who was seated directly across from him. Even his own daughter couldn't hold his complete focus when Sophia was in the room. After dinner, as the family dispersed to their various evening activities, the Queen decided to take a walk through the palace corridors. Her supposed evening stroll had a purpose. She wanted to see if her suspicions about Alexander and Sophia's behavior would prove correct when they thought they were unobserved. She didn't have to wait long. As she rounded the corner near the library, She heard hushed voices coming from the alcove that housed a centuries-old tapestry. Pressing herself against the wall, she listened as Alexander and Sophia spoke in urgent whispers about meeting tomorrow evening in the old conservatory. The conversation was brief but laden with meaning, and when they emerged from their hiding spot, both looked around carefully before heading in opposite directions. The queen stood frozen in the shadows, her heart pounding as the full reality of the situation crashed over her. This wasn't just an innocent attraction or a momentary lapse in judgment. Alexander and Sophia were actively planning secret meetings, which meant their relationship had progressed far beyond inappropriate glances and casual touches. That night, as she lay awake in her bed, Queen Isabella grappled with the magnitude of the crisis facing her family. She thought about Elena's radiant smile at dinner, about Duke Richard's excitement over his upcoming trip, about the innocent children who would be affected by any scandal. She also thought about the monarchy itself and the thousands of people whose livelihoods and traditions depended on the royal family's reputation. By dawn, she had made another difficult decision. Before confronting Alexander directly, she needed to understand the full scope of the relationship between him and Sophia. Tomorrow evening, she would position herself near the old conservatory and witness for herself just how far this betrayal had progressed. Only with complete knowledge could she hope to find a way to protect her family, her kingdom, and everyone involved from the devastating consequences that seemed increasingly inevitable. The confrontation that evening unfolded nothing like anyone had planned. Elena arrived at Alexander's office at precisely 10 o'clock, just as Sophia was preparing to leave. The three of them stood frozen in the doorway for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the truth hanging heavy in the air between them. Sophia's face went pale as she realized they had been discovered, while Alexander looked like a man whose worst nightmare had just materialized. Elena's voice was steady and calm as she spoke, though her hands trembled slightly. She told them both to sit down because they were going to have an honest conversation for the first time in months. The evidence she presented was overwhelming and undeniable. Phone records, photographs, witness testimonies, and the messages she had discovered that morning painted a complete picture of their deception. Alexander's reaction surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of denying the affair or making excuses, he broke down completely. The pressure of living a double life, the guilt of betraying his wife and family, and the fear of losing everything he held dear had been eating away at him for months. He confessed not just to the affair, but to the deeper truth. He had fallen in love with Sophia and no longer knew how to live without her. Sophia, however, responded differently. As the initial shock wore off, she became defensive and then angry. She accused Elena of spying on them and violating their privacy. She claimed that Alexander had been unhappy in his marriage long before she arrived, and that she had simply provided him with the emotional connection he had been missing. Most hurtfully, she suggested that Elena had been too focused on royal duties and the children to notice that her husband needed more than she was giving him. The argument that followed revealed years of hidden tensions and unspoken resentments. Alexander admitted that while he respected Elena and cared for her deeply, their marriage had always felt more like a partnership than a passionate love affair. Sophia had awakened feelings in him that he hadn't known existed, and he couldn't imagine returning to the way things were before. Elena listened to these painful confessions with remarkable composure, but when she finally responded, her words cut deeper than any angry outburst could have. She told Alexander that she had always known their marriage began as an arrangement, but she had believed they had built something real and meaningful together over the years. She had given him her heart, her loyalty, and her complete trust, only to discover that he had been sharing his most intimate thoughts and feelings with another woman while pretending contentment with her. The conversation took a devastating turn when Elena asked directly whether Alexander wanted to end their marriage. His hesitation to answer immediately told her everything she needed to know. When he finally admitted that he didn't know how to choose between his duty to his family and his feelings for Sophia, Elena made the choice for him. She announced that she was prepared to grant him a divorce if that was what he truly wanted. but with conditions that would protect their children and preserve what remained of the family's dignity. Alexander would have to publicly accept full responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage without mentioning Sophia's involvement. He would also have to agree to a custody arrangement that prioritized the children's stability and emotional well-being above his own desires. Furthermore, Elena demanded that if Alexander chose Sophia, he would have to abdicate his claim to the throne and leave the country permanently. She would not allow their children to grow up watching their father live openly with the woman who had destroyed their family. The scandal would be contained as a simple case of an incompatible royal marriage, rather than a sordid affair with a family member. Sophia's reaction to these terms revealed the true nature of her feelings for Alexander. Faced with the reality that choosing him would mean giving up her comfortable life as a duchess and living in exile as the former prince's mistress, her commitment began to waver. She protested that Elena was being unreasonable and vindictive, that love should conquer all obstacles, but her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. The final blow came when Lord Chancellor Montgomery entered the office, having been summoned by Elena when the conversation began to escalate. He brought with him legal documents that Elena had requested earlier that day, divorce papers that would dissolve her marriage to Alexander immediately, along with agreements regarding custody, financial support, and public statements. Montgomery also delivered news that changed everything. Queen Isabella had spent the afternoon in conversation with Duke Richard, who had returned unexpectedly from his business trip. Richard now knew everything about his wife's affair and had made his own decisions about their future. Sophia was no longer welcome in his home or his life, and their marriage would be annulled within the week. As the reality of her situation sank in, Sophia broke down completely. She had lost both her husband and her lover in a single evening and faced social exile from the only world she had ever known. Her pleas for understanding and forgiveness fell on deaf ears as the consequences of her choices became undeniably clear. Alexander found himself forced to make an immediate decision. He could sign Elena's papers and leave with Sophia to build a new life somewhere far away, or he could end the affair and fight to rebuild his marriage and reclaim his role in the family. The romantic fantasy of running away with his forbidden love suddenly seemed less appealing when faced with the harsh realities of what they would be giving up. The evening ended with Alexander asking for time to consider his options, a request that Elena granted with one final condition. He had until noon the next day to make his choice, after which she would assume he had chosen exile and would proceed accordingly. As the three of them left the office in different directions, each carrying the weight of decisions that would reshape their lives forever, the future of the royal family hung in the balance. Lord Chancellor William Montgomery arrived at the palace before dawn, summoned by the Queen's urgent and mysterious message. His weathered face showed concern as he was escorted to the Queen's private study, where he found her looking as if she hadn't slept in days. The man who had served 3 monarchs over 4 decades recognized the signs of a constitutional crisis brewing. Queen Isabella wasted no time in explaining the situation, sharing Lady Margaret's letter and detailing her own observations over the past week. Montgomery listened without interruption, his expression growing graver with each revelation. When she finished describing the scene in the conservatory, he sat back in his chair and removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly as he processed the magnitude of the crisis. The Lord Chancellor's response was both practical and sobering. He explained that if Alexander abdicated to pursue this relationship, it would create a constitutional nightmare. The line of succession would pass to his younger brother, Prince James, who was only 22 and completely unprepared for the responsibilities of ruling. Moreover, the scandal surrounding Alexander's departure would taint the monarchy for generations, potentially leading to calls for abolishing the institution entirely. Montgomery also pointed out legal complications that the Queen hadn't fully considered. If Alexander divorced Elena, the custody battle over their children would become a public spectacle. The children's titles and positions in the succession would be questioned, and Elena's family, the powerful House of Alderton, would likely demand justice that could further destabilize the crown. As they discussed potential solutions, Both agreed that the situation required immediate intervention, but they disagreed on the approach. Montgomery favored a direct confrontation with Alexander, presenting him with an ultimatum: end the affair immediately or face exile from the royal family. The Queen, however, worried that such harsh tactics might push her son to make even more reckless decisions. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock. Princess Elena herself stood in the doorway, her usual composure cracked by obvious distress. She had discovered something that changed everything. In her hand she held Alexander's personal phone, which he had accidentally left in their breakfast room that morning. Elena had initially intended to simply return the phone to her husband, but when it rang repeatedly with messages from someone identified only as S, curiosity had gotten the better of her. The messages she found painted a clear picture of an ongoing affair, complete with declarations of love, plans for secret meetings, and discussions about their future together. The most recent message, sent just hours earlier, mentioned meeting that evening in Alexander's private office after the rest of the family retired. The revelation that Elena already knew about the affair dramatically altered the Queen's strategy. The sweet, trusting daughter-in-law she had been trying to protect had proven to be more perceptive and resilient than anyone had given her credit for. Elena's composure as she presented the evidence showed a strength of character that impressed both the Queen and Montgomery. Elena revealed that she had suspected something for months but had convinced herself she was being paranoid. Alexander had become distant and distracted, often making excuses to avoid family activities and spending increasing amounts of time away from their private quarters. When Sophia had joined the family, Elena had initially welcomed her warmly, but gradually noticed how her husband's mood seemed to depend entirely on whether Sophia was present at family gatherings. The princess also shared details that the Queen had missed during her observations. Alexander had been receiving mysterious phone calls at odd hours, often stepping onto their private balcony to take them. He had started going for late-night walks through the palace, claiming he needed air to help him sleep. Most telling of all, their intimate relationship had virtually ceased over the past 6 months, with Alexander always finding reasons to avoid being alone with his wife. As the three of them discussed the situation, Elena surprised them both by taking control of the conversation. She announced that she had already made several decisions. First, she would not allow her children to be raised in an environment of lies and betrayal. Second, she refused to be humiliated by pretending ignorance while the affair continued. Third, she intended to confront both Alexander and Sophia that very evening. During their planned meeting in his office, Montgomery immediately objected, warning that such a confrontation could lead to public scenes that would benefit no one. The Queen agreed, suggesting that Elena should allow them to handle the situation more discreetly. But Elena had clearly spent considerable time thinking about this moment, and she had developed her own plan. She proposed a coordinated approach, where she would confront Alexander privately first, giving him an opportunity to end the affair voluntarily and work toward rebuilding their marriage. If he refused or continued to lie, she would then expose the situation to the entire family, including Duke Richard. Elena believed that shame and family pressure might accomplish what appeals to duty, and honor could not. The princess also revealed that she had been documenting evidence of the affair for several weeks, including photographs of Alexander and Sophia's secretive behavior and copies of suspicious messages and phone records. She had prepared this evidence not out of vindictiveness, but to protect herself and her children in case the situation became public. As their emergency meeting concluded, the three conspirators agreed on a plan. Elena would confront Alexander that evening as originally intended, but Montgomery would be positioned nearby to intervene if the situation escalated. The Queen would simultaneously have a conversation with Sophia, making it clear that the family was aware of the affair and that continuing it would have serious consequences for everyone involved. The most difficult part of their plan involved Duke Richard, who remained completely unaware of his wife's betrayal. They agreed that he deserved to know the truth, but only after they had attempted to resolve the situation quietly. If Alexander and Sophia agreed to end their relationship immediately, Richard might never need to learn about it at all. As Elena left the study to prepare for the most difficult conversation of her marriage, Queen Isabella marveled at her daughter-in-law's courage and wisdom. The shy princess who had entered the family 5 years earlier had grown into a formidable woman who refused to be a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Whatever happened next, the queen knew that Elena would emerge from this crisis with her dignity intact.